BBC One this Christmas, the best value anywhere. For ski gear.
All this equipment here is manufactured by the one country that leads the world in alpine clothing, namely Fiji.
All-hearted, Derek.
Couple of bob for charity.
He's trying to save Wales.
Not after the way they beat us at rugby last year.
Christmas Day is Only Fools and Horses at 6:05 on BBC One.
I don't know what's happening to me. I have never wanted a woman as much as I wanted you.
White Palace, a love story with a difference on BBC Two shortly. There's a thief in Slade Prison. Now there's a surprise. Trouble is, one of them has a taste for Fletcher's pineapple chunks. Classic BBC comedy in 25 minutes. And before that, on BBC One, the evening news with Philip Hayton.
West Yorkshire police arrest a man after 3 young children are left alone in their home. Officers investigating the case buy them presents and say the children didn't know it was Christmas. The gang who raped 2 schoolgirls in southeast London are urged to give themselves up. A security alert at Gatwick Airport ends peacefully. A man on a flight from Athens had claimed to have a bomb on board. And that clash between Fashanu and Mabbott, the FA say it was not deliberate. Good evening. 3 children aged 5 and under are tonight in a foster home after being found alone at home in Leeds. Carol singers discovered them with hardly any food and very little bedding. The electricity meter had 11 minutes to run. Police say there were no signs of Christmas in the house, no toys nor decorations. In the words of one policeman, it was just another dark day in their short lives. This evening, police arrested a man, but they're still looking for the children's mother.
It was carol singers on the Woodhouse estate in Leeds who discovered the home alone youngsters. They used their carol singing money to buy the 3 children crisps and lemonade, then called the police. Officers found 2 boys aged 5 and 1 and their 4-year-old sister. Their father had left 5 hours earlier without saying when he'd be back.
The house was sparsely furnished, there was very little food in the house, the electricity was about to terminate any minute. So it was a case of getting the children to a place of safety.
West Yorkshire Police say the number of children being left to cope alone is growing. Local people said these 3 children were often unsupervised. But at Christmas it appears even more heartless.
The fact that 3 children have been left alone at this time of the year in such sad circumstances, they didn't know it was Christmas. As far as these children are concerned, it was just another dark day in their short lives.
Well, they're well placed now, I'm pleased to say, all together with the foster parents in Seacroft, Leeds, and we're happy to say that they're going to have a very good Christmas. They're going to get presents which are provided from social services and the police. They're going to get some good meals. They're going to have some good fun, and they're going to remain being looked after by social services for the next 7 days.
The police presents come from nearly £200 collected by officers who wanted to introduce the children to the true spirit of Christmas. The presents will be delivered in the morning to the foster parents' home. Tonight, detectives said they'd arrested a man, and a man who said he was the father of the children denied that he'd left them to fend for themselves. He blamed a babysitter and said he'd been in touch with police as soon as he found their note saying the children had been taken into care. John Thorne, BBC News, Leeds.
4 children from Sheffield have been taken to foster homes after they were found alone in their house. The 3 girls, aged 12, 10 and 3, and their 1-year-old brother were discovered yesterday evening. Police in the Wood Seats area of Sheffield say they've had such a huge response to an appeal for Christmas gifts for the children that they can't cope with anymore. Police in London say they've had a number of calls about the gang rape of 2 teenage girls by several youths while a large group watched. The attack in Catford on Wednesday evening has been condemned by the local MP as wanton lawlessness. The girls are now being cared for at home.
The 2 girls, aged 14 and 15, got off a bus on Wednesday evening and were heading for this hamburger restaurant in Catford when they were surrounded and grabbed by the gang. The girls were dragged into this alleyway behind these gates beside a public house and raped repeatedly by up to 7 of the gang, who police say are predominantly black and in their late teens. The attacks continued for 20 minutes before someone from the pub disturbed them and they ran off.
Well, obviously the girls are very shocked, and as a result of the incident that's occurred, they are obviously taking medication under doctor's advice.
The emotion every woman and every reasonable person must think must be horror, absolute horror.
What's your message to this gang?
Some of you weren't happy, some of you couldn't have been happy, and just go down and give yourself up. Tell your parents, tell somebody, but literally give yourself up.
The attack has shocked the local community.
2 young girls, 30 blokes. I think it's disgraceful myself. I think there should be more police on the streets, mate, doing something about it.
It's shocking. Yeah, because I only live up the road, and like it's going to be hard for people to walk on the street.
Police say the sheer numbers involved in these attacks were extraordinary. There were between 25 and 30 in the gang, the majority looking on and possibly encouraging the rapists. It was, say the police, a dreadful and horrifying ordeal for the girls. Though the attack has caused fear locally, police say it was a rare occurrence in a normally peaceful area. They say they've been receiving calls as a result of the publicity. They believe customers of McDonald's may have seen the girls being grabbed, and they're appealing to witnesses to come forward. Gary Lloyd, BBC News, at Catford in southeast London.
A teenager who was beaten unconscious by a gang in East London last September has come out of a coma. Qudus Ali is said to be making steady progress at the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel and has spoken for the first time since his attack. A man has been charged with attempting to murder him. In Israel, the first Christmas celebrations since the signing of the Middle East peace deal have been marred by a series of clashes between Palestinians and Israeli troops. A senior Israeli army officer was shot dead in the occupied Gaza Strip. And there were also disruptions in Bethlehem, where people were allowed to celebrate in the main square for the first time at Christmas in 7 years.
Raising the Palestinian flag over Bethlehem. Under Israeli law, that's illegal, and the police had earlier taken it down. This time, there was some pushing and shoving, but the police didn't intervene to take it down. The Palestinians saw it as a small but symbolic victory. The Israelis thought it was deliberately provocative, but since technically speaking the flag wasn't flying on a building, they decided to ignore it. By evening, people were heading in through the army checkpoints to join the celebration after a gap of 6 Christmases. Manger Square in the centre was relatively recently built, and it's a big commercial enterprise, not all of it in the best possible taste. Still, the celebrations look good to the man who runs Bethlehem.
Makes me very happy indeed, because I consider Bethlehem to be the capital of the Christmas work.
Down below, a Palestinian pipe band harked back to the days of the British Mandate. And by now there was no shortage of Palestinian flags, even one in the shop run by the mayor's family.
So this isn't simply the first Christmas Eve to be celebrated here in Manger Square for 7 years. It's also got a distinctly Palestinian flavour to it. And although the Israeli soldiers up on the rooftops may not altogether like the sight of the Palestinian flags, they seem to be under instructions not to do anything about them.
In the meantime, choirs from round the world were starting to perform Christmas music. A Fijian choir sang from the Messiah. This will presumably be the last Christmas before limited self-rule for Palestinians is introduced. It might be commercial, but at least it was peaceful here. John Simpson, BBC News, Bethlehem.
The 4 main church leaders in Northern Ireland have united in calling for a permanent end to violence in the province. On the first day of the IRA's 3-day ceasefire, they appealed to the terrorists to grasp the gauntlet of peace.
The leaders of the 4 main churches in Ireland met the Prime Minister on his visit to Northern Ireland 2 days ago. They were consulted by John Major and the Irish Prime Minister Albert Reynolds before the Downing Street Declaration. Today, the Catholic Primate, Cardinal CAHAL DALY, urged the IRA to take up the gauntlet of peace offered by Mr Major and the Taoiseach.
I think that the declaration gives everyone the opportunity of working peacefully for their own aims, whatever they may be, without threatening anyone, without any intention or desire to coerce anyone.
The Presbyterian moderator, head of the largest Protestant denomination in Northern Ireland, echoed his call, but he warned that the benefits of peace would not be immediate.
There's a lot of distrust, there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of sorrow and distress, and everybody has been hurt. That hurt has to be healed. If peace was declared tomorrow, there would be, certainly the hurts would still go on for a long time to come.
On this, the first day of the IRA's temporary Christmas ceasefire, the hope of most people in Northern Ireland is that 1994 might bring a permanent end to the violence of the last 25 years. Noreen Erskine, BBC News, Belfast.
A security alert at Gatwick Airport has ended. A man was led away by police after the alert, which began when a passenger on board an aircraft claimed he was carrying a bomb in a suitcase. The plane, an Airbus 320 owned by Excalibur Airways, was flying from Athens to Gatwick. There were more than 170 people on board flight EXC 5812. After it landed at Gatwick at 8:30 this evening, the airliner taxied to a remote corner of the airport where it was surrounded by police. No bomb was found, and the passengers began leaving the plane at about 10 o'clock. 4 gunmen in southern Russia have released 7 school children and a teacher in return for a $10 million ransom. But it's thought they're still holding hostage 4 boys and 3 adults on board a helicopter. The group was kidnapped yesterday from a school at Rostov-on-Don. They flew to Krasnodar and then to Minerali Vodi. Some reports say they're heading for Iran. The Iranian government has condemned the kidnapping.
The helicopter carrying the teenage hostages flew into this airport in southern Russia today, where anti-terrorist troops were standing by to storm the aircraft if ordered to. Instead, though, the authorities decided on a softly approach. The 4 gunmen on board the helicopter were known to be extremely well armed. It's thought they're probably from the Caucasus region and have religious sympathies with Iran, where they want to fly to. But their main motive seems to have been financial. They demanded a ransom of $10 million. And to many people's surprise, the Russian government came up with the money. It arrived from Moscow in bagfuls of $100 bills. The cash had been hastily borrowed from commercial banks in the capital. As a result, most of the school children were then released. They seemed exhausted after their ordeal, but otherwise in good spirits. One of the hostages told Russian television they hadn't been badly treated, that the kidnappers allowed them blankets, for example, when they got cold. The children had been kidnapped yesterday from their classroom in the town of Rostov-on-Don, gunmen firing shots into the ceiling. Ever since, distraught relatives have been waiting anxiously for news, amid reports that the kidnappers were either on drugs or suffering from syphilis or AIDS. Negotiators have spent the day pleading for the release of all the hostages. They're hoping that the 4 boys still on board will be freed later. A special government task force which has taken charge of the crisis may be accused of giving in to the kidnappers, but any assault on the helicopter would almost certainly end in a bloodbath. Ben Brown, BBC News, Moscow.
The Christmas ceasefire in Bosnia has largely been ignored by the 3 warring factions as battles raged in most parts of the country. The capital, Sarajevo, has again come under Serb artillery attack, and heavy fighting has continued around Vitez and Gornji Vakuf in central Bosnia. In the Muslim enclave of Bihać, in the northwest, a French UN soldier was shot and killed. Meanwhile, British troops in the country have been doing their best to lift the spirits of the local people.
Before dawn and day 3 of the Muslim offensive on the Lashva Valley. 70,000 Croats live here. They've lost some villages this week. The Muslims have gained ground. The local Croat commander in Vitez, Colonel Tihomir Blaškić, says this is one of the worst attacks since the war began in the valley. The Muslims are pushing forward from 6 positions in the hills. No one expects the offensive to ease, certainly not for Christmas. The season has brought freshly wounded and homeless. The fighting has closed roads and stopped help and supplies getting to them. Despite the misery around them, British troops keep the Christmas spirit. They worship in the gymnasium of the battered Vitez school. It's now their base headquarters. The chaplain appeals for peace